this case, and my older son's girlfriend came, and then her daughter came. That was the first time they met. You did announce. Because I was like, why are they, no, they're not pregnant.
Oh, they announced
No.
it.
No, they didn't announce, but it sounds like you're bringing your hair.
Hi, everyone. My name's Angela. I don't know if I'm sticking around with you all evening or not, but I just want to say thank you for all your hard work. And this meeting's being recorded to the cloud for upload to different, it will be on the town account, but I think Amherst Media is carrying it live. So I know that you've used this room several times before, but just as a refresher, when you want to speak, you have to press the button and look for the little green light on your microphone. And anytime that green light's on, it's picking up your voice. So just be aware of that. And then when you remove your finger, mine's staying on, so just be careful with that piece. And you have to turn the green light off in order to not be picked up. So have a great meeting, everyone. And again, thank you for all of your service.
Thank you, Angela.
Sounds fun.
Okay, thank you all for your patience while we got all of that sorted. Okay, so at 6:37, I will call the regional school committee to order. Yes, and my green light's on.
Bring it closer.
Closer. Okay. So our first item is entering into executive session, but I see that there is some public here. If the committee is okay, if we can switch those and move public comment to first. Okay. So if there are any members of the public that wanted to come up and make a 3-minute statement, we can start there. Just, you can make it so.
Bush. There we go. Hi, my name's Chris Hockman, resident of Pelham. Came from previous meetings. Noted earlier today, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Miss. Noticed earlier today that the meeting was scheduled for in the high school library. Checked before I went and saw I'd be going to the wrong place if I did go there. Thought, oh, there must have been an emergency of some kind to cause the change of venue within 48 hours without a public notice prior to that. So if this is not an exchange, I know, but if possible, could you explain to the public the need for the change of venue? That's it. Thank you.
Yes, that is a very easy question. The heat in the library isn't working. So as soon as we knew it wasn't going to work there, there should be a note that is on the high school door. And as soon, it was also updated on board docs as soon as the decision was made. And then I also believe it was on the town websites for the other meetings. Okay, so. Yes, come on, come up.
And there are two concerns I have tonight. First is my concern that people may not take the utterances of the president-elect seriously in terms of his intention to round up undocumented immigrants. And I would just urge both the committee for president and the school administrators to have a plan to coordinate with the Amherst Police Department. Plan of action just in case the incoming administration would think that it would be fun to make an example of that. So better to have a plan and not need it than to have an emergency for this. The second concern I have is to bring to the attention of the school committee the statement I made to the town council on December 2nd in terms of what I believe is just from an outside viewpoint. The way to handle the situation with the deal that the manager for 3 years has concealed surpluses and with intent of using them only for town services. And a plan which drew the ire of half of the city, the city council to the president at the meeting. So it's not just single board committee. And so I just want to present to the school committee my thoughts about how the school district could be compensated for 3 years of pursuing very substantial budget surpluses. And I think that some compensation is necessary to make up for the damage that's been done to the school district by the concealment and the failure to appropriate the necessary resources for the school. So I'm not really all I have to say. I'm a word in writing.
Excellent timing. Thank you very much. Okay. Any other members of the public?
And I'll call it in the school committee to order at 1 p.m. and let everyone use the button on your mic.
I mean, it sounds ooh, hold on. We're having a problem. It's playing back today's meeting. Okay, pause.
Tonight's meeting because Sarah didn't call them.
I think something happened, like, it's. We're good now? Okay. Okay. Did you want to come and make a public comment? Perfect. Excellent. Please join us for 3 minutes. Thank you. Sorry about that.
I live at 30 Harris Street, and I'm an ESL bilingual educator in the Combinante School Language Program at Fort River Elementary. As a public school educator, my goal is to build a safe and welcoming environment for all students, parents, caretakers, regardless of their immigration status. With Donald Trump's second presidential platform threatening to deport the people here, our public schools in Massachusetts need to be prepared to advocate for everyone. During Trump's last administration, some schools in Massachusetts were frequented by Immigration and Customs agents as they sought to detain undocumented parents and young children. This time around, ICE agents could be much more involved, given the rhetoric that Trump has been spewing, to demand entry into our schools. As a local educator working with immigrant students and their families, I appreciate Amherst's reaffirmation of the December 2019 decision to be a sanctuary city and not perform the functions of immigration officers. Yet Massachusetts public schools will need to prepare a plan of action to empower educators, students, and families with their inalienable rights if they were to encounter ICE officials and be detained. Katie Richardson, the multicultural, multilingual education administrator of the public schools in Amherst, and I were fortunate to connect with an immigration-led 501c3 nonprofit organization called IM Schools, like IMM Schools, that partners with educators and community leaders to ensure schools are safe and inclusive spaces for immigrants and families. After having an initial conversation with IM Schools, our next steps are to discuss this opportunity with other districts and building leaders to determine what participation would be possible. I'm sharing this with you now today, so you are aware and can help support this work as we move forward. What makes IM Schools unique is that it is exclusively informed, designed, and facilitated by current and former immigrant educators, students, and parents. By elevating their leadership as true experts, they work at the intersection of education and immigration. Through this unique approach, their team translates the complexity of immigration experiences into effective, intentional, and research-based programming that leads to enduring change within schools.
Sure.
My hope is that if we are able to partner within schools in this initial training, which they have generously offered to provide for a fraction of their market price, and I think we can afford it with our budget. Pelham Regional School Committee, I would like, hopefully, for them to be able to find the means to sustain future funding during this new presidential term. Thank you for your time and consideration. This important work in the community.
Thank you. Okay.
Point of order. Thank you. Could I just ask that we have another public comment period after our executive session because of the location change and because the way it's listed on the agenda? Thank you.
Okay. So the Amherst Pelham Regional School Committee will now consider entering executive session in accordance with Open Meeting Law MGLC 30A, Section 21A, to conduct collective bargaining sessions, Amherst Pelham Education Association, APEA, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body, and the chair so declares, and I do declare, with the intent to return to open session.
Second.
Deb? Sarah?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Bridget?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
William?
Yes.
Sarah Beth, yes. Irv?
Yes.
Tillman?
Yes.
And Anna?
Yes.
Okay, so we are in executive session and we will be back shortly. Over there. Yeah.
To everyone who's watching on TV, we were adjusting technology for an upcoming presentation. At this time, the school committee is in executive session and they will come back into normal session shortly.
Being- Okay, are we all back? Perfect, okay. At 7:19, I will call us back to open session. Okay. Next is chair's update, and I actually have a little bit of a long one, so I apologize. Okay, so first I want to say thank you to the town of Amherst for letting us use their space tonight while we're having heating issues in the library. And thank you to Angela Mills for helping get us set up, and David Amherst Media for troubleshooting. Second, I know it was a few weeks ago at this point, but I wanted to take a moment to remind our students and families of School Committee Policy JII, the protection of undocumented students, which states immigration and customs enforcement personnel or employees or other agencies acting as immigration agents will be refused entry to our district properties or access to students under district custody unless the superintendent and district council are provided with a warrant signed by a judge authorized the immigration agents into the property. So I just wanted to, we've had a lot of conversation about that earlier. I wanted to make sure, we have a school committee policy stating that. Okay. Next, I participated in the superintendent for a day where one of our middle school students was superintendent for the Amherst Pelham Regional School District. Superintendent Lena had meetings with department heads and directors. We had conversations about MCAS results, and she shared her top 3 concerns, which were the need to increase student voice, and not just the voice of the good kids, as she put it, but rather all kids. The need to increase morale for both kids and adults. And she brought up the accessibility in terms of our special ed vans, which are all very old. And of the 8 we have currently, only 3 of them are wheelchair accessible. So thank you very much to Superintendent Lena. And then I wanted to say thank you to our member towns for their continued support for our track and fields project. Thank you to Amherst, Shrewsbury, and Pelham CPA and finance committees for their commitment, as well as to Leverett for the considering recommendation for the CPA fundings at their spring town meeting. I also wanted to thank Dave Zomack, the Amherst Assistant Town Manager, Melissa Zawitsky, Finance Director, and Bob Parent, Coordinator of Special Capital, who been their continued support and work with SLR to keep our project moving forward and on track. January remains the anticipated bid date and summer of 2025 for construction. And then a few more quick updates. I signed the MOU with the town of Amherst for the adaptive swim program for the use of the pool area in the middle school. We had a great conversation and we all agreed to take the discussion up again in January. So it can, future MOUs can be wrapped up in time for FY26 budgeting. I have been working to create operating protocols and an annual agenda for the committee's consideration at hopefully a joint retreat, which I have mentioned to my other chairs sometime to be scheduled sometime in January, and we'll work together to get that scheduled. And then finally, we will be scheduling another meeting to jump on back of the Amherst meeting next week. As going through to create the annual agenda, I came across a few things that we need to wrap up before the end of the year, which will be the 25-26 calendar, hear any sabbatical request, any new potential courses for the high school. So hopefully for the region, it won't be too long, and I'll work on getting that all sorted for next week. Whew. All right, that is all. Any school committee announcement or subcommittee updates?
I just wanted to say regarding the change of location of the meeting, I just wanted to say publicly that it's not a violation of open meeting law to change the location of a meeting with less than 48 hours notice for reasons such as facilities issues, like we had with the problem with the heat in the high school. Public bodies are permitted to change location as long as you like put a sign at the original location so that people know what the new location is. Thank you.
Irv, did you have your hand up?
Hand up, and this, just wanted to make sure and public announcement that will be my last in-person meeting until April. And that as has happened before, I will be virtual from that point. From after this meeting, I will be virtual until the April meeting.
Okay, thank you. So I'm also gonna ask that you like stick your hand, I can't see everybody. I apologize if I don't call on you. Okay, any further, yeah, Bridget, good.
I just quickly wanted to mention that the School Equity Advisory Committee meets tomorrow evening at 6:30. It is scheduled to be in the high school library, so if you're planning to attend, please be aware that we may have a change in venue. Will it be fixed by tomorrow? Oh, excellent. Okay, so at the high school library, and parents, school staff, and community members interested in equity in our schools are all invited.
Great. Anything further? Okay. Oh, and just a announcement from the APEA negotiating subcommittee, we have had our very first meeting. We have decided to work in with IBV, interest-based bargaining, and we will keep you updated. All right. Superintendent's update.
All right, good night, everyone. Go ahead and to the next one, maybe. As always, I want to refocus us on the district priorities: student safety and well-being, healing and stabilization of the district, and data and accountability for equity. And they remain 3 top priorities for this year. And so, I'll get to talk about some key highlights, and keeping it student-centered and very short, because I think the next 2 presentations after this, it's all me talking, then I'll use your mic. So winter sports tryouts and everything have begun, whether it's basketball. I know Alpine Ski has a trip coming up. So the winter sports and winter sports tryouts have begun. And I'd like to thank our athletic director, Victoria, and her assistant, Georgia, for the hard work that they do with all of the coaches. I know that in preparation for winter sports, they invited Tanya McIntyre to come in and do an equity training for all of the coaches to talk about what does that look like. And they were able to delve into different scenarios, real world scenarios that happen at different sports games, to talk about how do you address that as the coach? What does that look like? Because sometimes in athletics, because of not just, I'm not going to say sportsmanship, but because of the familiarity, we often forget that there's a line or a boundary that may be crossed, and we may overlook it. So it was very, very great that, Victoria worked with Tanya to have that training for all of the winter sport coaches. And I think that it's one that they're going to continue for all of the coaches moving forward. So I wanted to make sure that that was stated. My first snow day, December 5th, and I survived. It was really, really great to work with just being a new superintendent in a new area, and having the opportunity to work with the other superintendents around. It has been really, really great. It wasn't my first time in snow. It's the most snow that I've seen in a very long time. But I think the adrenaline, everything that happened that morning, I have to thank my team, Rupert, Mike, Jerry, Seth, Jen, Naibi, Megan, just being up at 4 a.m. with me, making sure we already had our messages crafted from the day before. So everything was already prepped. We had to walk through different options. I have to thank, and I have their names, the DPW guys from and lady. So I have Amy from Amherst. I have Doug from, hold on. I think Doug is from Shutesbury, or Dave is from Shutesbury. Dave is from Shutesbury. I have Matt, and I have one more person, and I'm going to forget the name, Rick. And so they were all really, really responsive, very timely. When we made the initial first 2-hour call, it was, once this is at 4 a.m. and all 4 of them, were responsive. And it's like, we think we can make it if the snow slows down. But again, what I learned quickly and the first advice I got was the fact that I have to be able to take into consideration the higher elevation of our hill towns. And for a lot of it, the hill towns drive what happens, and they drove what happened here, including Pelham. And so 3 out of the 4 towns would not have made it in time. And something in my gut said, double back around 8 o'clock, just double back. And I did. And when I doubled back, the 3 out of 4, we weren't going to make it safely. And so we just agreed to make that call. And I switched to a full closure. NIBE in compliance is tracking our days and what happened so that at the end we can go back and see what occurred. But it was really great just to see the level of collaboration and support, and not just internally, but externally from everyone, just to make sure our children made it safely to school. So we did debrief as a district team and talk about what we could have done better next time, what we can do better next time, how quickly we respond. I'm going to publicly ask all parents to please update your information and sign on to Parent Square. I think that we have this resource, this tool to quickly get information out to you. I laughed at myself when I heard my recording because that was a real morning voice. It was not anything else but that. But we have the tool, we use it. Let's make sure that parents sign up. So I'm asking all parents to make sure that you're signed up to Parent Square. You monitor our Facebook, our social media pages, because we immediately sent out everything that way. So first snow day down in the books. Yes, done. All right. Celebrating community. And so this is every month we have a theme, and this month's theme is community for December. American Education Week, Sarah Best talked about Lena, and that's Lena and her dad there in the picture. And we really appreciated Lena, I think, for a young individual in middle school to think about what it is she wants. And when I asked them to craft their priorities, one of her main priorities was the social emotional wellness of the staff and the students. And so just prepping and giving them the opportunity to meet. And I have to, again, I'm going to thank each chair at their meetings, but thank you to the chairs for coming out and just spending time with their future leaders. Last week, I received an email from one of our drivers, Thomas, saying, hey, Dr. Z, come join me on the van as we pick up and just see what it is. And I was like, okay, I'll go. I was supposed to go tomorrow on Wednesday, but since Tuesday freed up for me, I went today. And it was a great experience to ride along. And guess where I went? Leverett and Shutesbury. So I had a great time. I saw some parents and some kids who came on the bus, and one parent was like, aren't you the superintendent? I was like, yeah, good morning. And it was a really great experience. And, I thank Thomas for reaching out and sending that email. Thank you to Janelle, who also was on the bus and just shared their experiences in the district. And to the students who rode the bus and were like, who's this other adult? And then more so for them, for even one of them came on and they were like, good morning. And then the joy, they're like, wait a minute, you're our superintendent. What are you doing on our bus? And I was like, you know who I am. Like, and another, student was like, you're in our school all the time. So it helped to ground me in the fact of why I do the work that I do. And I told Thomas to please let the other drivers know if they ever want me to ride along. I don't mind taking some time to ride. and just have a good conversation, but also to engage with the students and their families. So that was a really great opportunity this morning. Staff recognition, congratulations to Kelly, and I'm not going to destroy her last name, at the high school for being recognized as a 2025 Western Massachusetts Counselor Association School Counselor of the Year. So there are great things happening in the ARPS community. We do plan to highlight this on our social media pages and do some more, but I could not take the opportunity to talk about the great things in the region. More great news, again, very student-centered. Our ARMS students represented ARPS at the junior district auditions at Westfield College. 15 students got into the junior districts ensembles, with several receiving first chair positions. And I played first chair clarinet, so that is a big seat to sit in. You take the lead, and that means that our music leaders are doing what they need to do. Our students are representing the region well. 30 high school students got into the senior Western Division, Western Districts last month, with 27 receiving all-state recommendations. So again, great job, great work. Our programs are working, our programs are flourishing, and our students are representing us well. One of the things that we're highlighting now as we continue to go through, Seth has reached out to teachers, to school principals, and is, again, the superintendent's update should always be about what are the great things that are happening in our schools. And so we are looking at highlighting classrooms. And so we're talking about what's happening inside an ARPS classroom. And so at the middle school, social studies teacher Mick O'Connor teamed up with Amherst Historical Society, and they have been some great hands-on things. And of course, I can't find my notes because it's always someplace delved into something else. It's okay. It's here somewhere. And so, Yep. And so they were working on US history curriculum, and delving into the fact that they had a guest lesson from third graders in Amherst and Pelham. The program tailored early US history curriculum gives students a chance to examine local historical artifacts. And then in terms of the high school, thank you to Mr. Fable, who worked with his engineering students to take on and develop their own technological devices. And this is them pictured there. So the engineering students were taking safety to the next level with Sarah, a revolutionary smart garment designed to monitor the health of search and rescue personnel in real time. So this is really, I don't get to be in every classroom, and neither does my team, but when we are invited or we're walking through, we want to make sure we highlight the greatness that we see in each one of our highlights. So this is something I hope to continue to do in each one of the updates moving forward. Upcoming events, the listening lounge, due to my schedule that was scheduled for Monday, has been moved to Friday at 4:30. It's going to be held via Zoom. The information has been shared via Parent Square. We had a decent turnout last time. I said decent because I was happy that even one parent came. And so I asked that we come in. There is, again, we did share for the questions for this month, and I can't remember what the theme is, but we also have the Four Towns presentation. The high school has a production of The Curious Case of Watson Intelligence, and that starts December 13th, so 12th, 13th, and 14th at 7 p.m. Our band concert, our middle school band concert, is on December 18th at 7 p.m., featuring yours truly to read 2 sentences, but I am excited. I did not get my clarinet in time, so I will not be playing, but I am going to narrate a portion of it. And so very excited about that. And then winter break, which I think all of the students are looking forward to, starts on December 23rd to January 6th. And I believe we have a half day. No, this is not the 23rd. It's actually the 20th. The 20th, and there's a half day on the 20th. So yes. So definitely making sure that we enjoy ourselves, but come back safely to us on the 7th. And that is my wonderful, awesome update. Our high schoolers had a cake raffle where they made cakes, and I went in and I bid big money because I saw chocolate and I won. So that was my cake that I graciously won. And I wanted to say thank you to everyone. It's been great in the region.
Thank you, Dr. Z. I wanted to add one thing to your events list, which is on December 17th, a week from tonight at 7 p.m., the high school band, chorus, and orchestra will be having a concert at 7. Sure. Secondly, I want to say congratulations on surviving your first snow day. I feel like it's a thankless task and possibly a no-win. Like there will be people upset no matter what decision you make. And so congratulations, and I'm glad that you survived.
Thank you.
Yeah. And lastly, I want to say I was really excited to hear about the training or professional development for coaches. So thank you to Tanya, and thank you, Dr. Z, and thank you to Victoria and Georgia. I feel like I don't hear much about professional development for coaches. But there's such a big, I have a student athlete, and athletics is such a big part of students' lives. And for some students, it's like the reason they go to school that day so that they can compete that afternoon. So thank you for the support for the coaches.
Thank you. I think that one of the key things we have to, and you're right, there are students who go to school for athletics, there are students who go to school for music, there are students who go to school for art. And that's why it's very important for us to keep some of our programs together and grounded into what we do, because that's what drives the student focus on academics, their interest. So if we're going to keep pushing their interests, we have to make sure we're offering those strong programs. It's up to me tonight. All right, now we can. All right, so in actuality, this was actually on one of my updates to do in October, but that meeting had run kind of late. And so we opted to cancel right before the superintendent's update. But just note that this is our most recent Q1 projections, and we are getting ready to close out Q2. When we first talked about Q1 projections, and when we looked at in terms of Q1 report, not projections, Q1 report, because at that point was projections. There are some areas, the region currently is at 23.7%, as you can see. Areas of concern, as you can see, the percent of the budget used is our special education program is in red, which is consistently in red, and we're trying to work on that. The descriptions are there on the bottom. Other than special education, central administration, and facilities are all kind of trending a little bit higher. And so we're definitely looking at those for Q2. One of the things that we did is we invoked I can't say it's a freeze, but it's kind of like a prioritization. And so individuals, when they submit for requisitions, we have a procurement action form where they justify and clearly talk about the importance of certain things that we're trying to procure, just so that we can keep track of whole and make it to the end of our year in a fiscally responsible state. But again, all areas are being monitored on a monthly basis so that we can determine when we can release that. And so it also is helping us to keep our documentation in line. Typical for salaries to track lower in Q1, as most employees begin work in August. So, you'll see in Q2 salaries will probably take a bump up. Special education expenses, like I talked, are higher due to unfilled salary positions. So it's requiring us to contract out services. Also just making sure we have those compensatory services in place. And so that is driving up our costs in special education. Central administration expenses are typically 50% of Q1 as we encumber purchase orders for the entire year during Q1. So this is where we get in like our iReady and different major expenses, curricular expenses, programmatic expenses are done now. And so it typically trends higher. However, there was our payroll audit, new software, and higher attorney fees that also affected our central administration projection, well, where we are right now, causing us to be at a 63%. And then I talked about the budget restrictions already. And so I'm going to open up for as minimal questions as possible, but knowing that we're going to provide our Q2 update in time.
Hi, thank you for that. I was just wondering why the other insurance and benefits at 77% are in green.
I'll have to get back to you on that question
Thank
to
you.
make sure. And I think that that also comes from the fact that we pay that up ahead of time, like we normally pay it for the year now. That is our like liability insurance and everything, we pay that ahead. But I want to confirm it.
So I have a question and a request or a suggestion. One, I didn't see any comment on the facilities line and why that is in yellow or why that is 69% of the budget. If you know, great. If not, I
I'm gonna
guess I
get it
can
in a
ask
minute.
if Shannon's not watching this.
She is.
Oh,
So I
okay.
have the answer for Deb's question already. Thank you, Shannon. It is in green because we pay that, same thing I said, we pay the insurances bill completely upfront. So that's where it is. And give me a minute, we'll get the facilities explanation. And I think, yep, same thing. So the facilities is higher due to our custodial services and costs and supplies. So that's why right now it's exceeding.
Okay. But if it's in yellow, that indicates some degree of concern.
Correct.
All right. So my request or suggestion is that I would find it very helpful if there were standard footnotes about some of these expense accounts, because frankly, we get these every quarter, every 3 months. And I forget what's in other programs, what's in student programs and support services. So for some of these categories that are not completely obvious, like food service, it'd be nice just to always have a note about what is included.
Okay, so you're asking us to shift the document to have a footnote around what's included in the expense account?
Just for some, I mean, I can send a list, the
Okay.
ones that are a little bit opaque, at least to me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Great.
Me again?
Yep, preparation for our four towns meeting.
I'm gonna drink a sip of water. This is a skeleton version of our four towns. I think by now you know how I work. I presented it full version the last time and I went back and we gutted it and did it over. So I was like, we're not doing that again. We're just gonna focus in on what it is that we are going to present and talk about that. So this is our four towns prep. Can you make that bigger? The bottom, the plus sign. All right, so next slide. We have a singular goal. Achieve alignment and consensus. It is unfair for us to leave this December meeting without a clear understanding of what we are truly planning for and to be able to adequately prep and prepare our teachers, our staffing, our programming for next year. So our singular goal is to collaborate with the four towns to establish agreement on the FY25 base budget and FY26 assessment method to ensure the district can build a sustainable educational model that addresses the budget gap and serves students effectively. That's our goal. So this is just a recap of what we presented last time in September, and it was very early. I think I repeatedly said it's very early, and again, we presented 6 scenarios. We are not presenting 6 scenarios again this time. I think was the majority or half of the towns talks about scenario 1 and 2. I think we are presenting the most 3 possible scenarios. But we are not going into this whole 6 scenario thing. I think it's an injustice to the children for us to leave that meeting and not have a clear direction as a school district as to how do we plan and what do we do moving forward. So our goal is to present them, to push and to come to a consensus. Next one. So what have we learned since September 28th, 2024? So our budget deficit, we have a deficit, yes. However, we are moving in the right direction. There's progress. And so our Hampshire County retirement assessment came in a lot less. We're looking at the FY25 organizational consolidation of staff and staff attrition. As I think next week I get to present my findings. And so talk about not solutions, but directions forward and how we're trying to consolidate staff positions. Definitely right now, based on what happened with Hampshire County, we're our deficit, and if we don't get the towns to agree or to come to consensus, our deficit can be as low as 1.2 or can be as high as 2 million. So we definitely need to come to a consensus so that we can know what we're planning for. I would love to walk out of there and be like very clear that we're coming out with a 1.2 deficit and we can plan from that moving forward. Additional persistent unknowns that we have is our healthcare costs. Right now we're projecting a 13% increase. However, I think in the initial conversation, they had talked about 15%. And so everyone agreed to project at 13. We're not going to have that until February, late January, early February. So that consistently is an unknown that we're just planning for at 13%. Fingers crossed. I'm like, let them come in and be like, hey, 10%. I would be very happy. I'll be celebrating, honestly. Because 13% is a lot, and that if just a little decrease would give us a little bit of ease in positioning. Transportation's costs, our RFP has been published. Our bids open January 15th with a 10% increase cap. And so again, this is an unknown with the fact that we have budgeted a 10% increase, but we're not sure what we're going to receive. And that's why we're looking at all kinds of measures in terms of operationally to shift our transportation right now. How do we look at what's happening in terms of efficiency of our drivers, efficiency of how do we use the contract that we have in place? And I'll talk about that some more when we talk about, the strategies. And then our middle school, high school building consolidation. So in September, we didn't hear back from ASBA yet around what's occurring. Since then, we have had the invitation for accelerated repair program for our middle school roof. I did reach out to the project manager and request a meeting to talk about what that's going to look like for the region, to get some insight to help us determine whether or not we can still do the middle school, high school building consolidation. What are the next steps? So, and what are the risks to that grant if we consolidate versus not? So I want to be able to present a very clear picture to the committee, but also to the towns around what it is that needs to be done. So once that meeting is, I think that meeting's tomorrow, then I'll have more information around that. Next slide, maybe. So you have to zoom out a little bit so that, okay, thanks. All right, so this is our FY26 operating projections round 2. Circled in red is what our projected FY26 budget would be, 37 million, approximately 38 if you round up. However, this year we are projecting a 6.4% increase. And so that is just where we are currently at. And I think that the numbers are coming in below that when we look at what everyone is projecting, the towns are projecting to send forward, maybe. So that's why for me and for my team, our goal on Saturday is to have great conversation, but to walk out with a consensus because we need to plan for that number. And that increased talk, again, it looks at salaries year over year, our different contracts, the risk and benefits, our insurances, our transportation costs as well. So the strategic efficiencies that we're looking at in terms of closing the budget gap, we're looking at staffing optimization. We're looking at program review and redesign. This includes looking at our start times, looking at our schedules, looking at our implementation plans for different things that are happening at schools. I know that there was a whole research presented and things talked about in terms of students coming to school, high schoolers and their rhythms and everything. And then I'm also looking at the data that says our absenteeism isn't shifting in any direction with a later start time. It's actually really not. It's not getting better. So I'm trying, I have to balance that. And talk about how that in turn is affecting our transportation costs and cost savings. And so I also want you to know that every week I receive a list of students, approximately, let's say, I'm gonna say no less than 50, who leave school early for sports. So these students are dismissed early to play sports. And again, I'm all about the whole child. I am a proponent of it. But if the majority of the schools around us, like they're losing time. And so we've had discussions. I've asked the school leaders to present at the region to their staff the proposed changes. Even a discussion in terms of the use of the flex block, or even if it should continue. And so we're looking at the feedback from the teachers. Transportation cost savings. There is a cost savings that comes into it once we fix our programming, the efficiency of how we run even in the scheduling, because of the projected cuts, we are going to have to shift our schedules. We are going to have to shift how we run it to be able to sustain the staff, to educate our students with the staff that we would be able to sustain with the budget that we have. If that makes sense. And a part of that too is our transportation costs, because with a shift in our times, we may be able to use our drivers, and even overtime from our drivers costs less than it would for a 5-star bus. So we're looking at those types of budgetary conversations to determine how do we kind of fix that. We're also looking at the fact that we know that Leverett and Shutesbury has buses, and how do we writing them into our RFP, but not so much that it affects our start time or our students arriving to the region on time, which it kind of has been, but we've worked a lot better in that regard together. So that's kind of been showing differences, but we've kind of worked that into our RFP this year. Having discussion around what are alternative revenue streams, and that goes into 4, 5, and 6. Sarah Beth talked about the pool. I think we're looking at our procurement and operations in terms of how many purchase orders do we have an open purchase order, and then we don't use the whole thing, or we're exceeding it. So kind of fixing our fiscal practices. And then our facilities management goes into alternative revenue streams, which is how much are we charging for our facilities? What are we doing? What does that look like? And even more so, our deferred maintenance on our buildings, our custodial supplies and services. We had to call in a contractor, an emergency contractor, to come in and fix the heating system. That person had to go up on the roof to replace these parts. The parts had to be rushed in. Like, we want to make sure that our schools function. We want to make sure that everything is there, but these are costs. And when they're emergency costs that may have exceeded our contingency because of the placement of the item that needs to be repaired, we then have an exceeding cost than what we budgeted for. So those are all of the strategic efficiencies that we're working on in terms of closing the budget gap. And I believe that's the end of what we're going to talk about for 4 towns.
Okay, Tillman.
Thanks for the presentation. On slide 3, you said you weren't gonna present 6 scenarios, but could you tell us what the parameters are of the scenarios that you're planning to show?
Sure. So let me get into my computer. The parameter, of course, the other one. The parameters are: 1, we're having 6% in the base, and then at 4%. And I think that what we also were told by, or the projection my team was told, was 2.5% or 3% from some towns. So we were also going that way. Yes.
Can I?
Yep.
May I suggest that we stop talking about the 6% base
Just
FY
the same
25?
thing.
In the last Four Towns meeting, if I recall, the general consensus, maybe not everybody's consensus, was that what was voted for is the base.
Okay.
And we can take it from there. If a town does not agree with that base, they should think about what percentage they want to give this year to calibrate for whatever their number is in their mind. But my understanding is that it was voted for, which corresponds to 6%.
Okay.
That the FY 25 budget is a 6% increase over FY 24, and that was voted for across all towns. End of story.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll do that, Tillman.
So I think that's a reasonable starting point from all four towns' perspectives. It's not a done deal, but I think all stars are going to line up for that. And thank you to the town and finance committee for all their hard work in that area.
Did you have a?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that it's been pretty much, I think there's been pretty much a consensus with at least Amherst that we will be going with that scenario number. We'll support the 6%, the 4%. That's something that they have informally and pretty soon will formally embrace that number. A question I have was that in your operating projections round 2, you have total expenses of 37,541,375, which is a 2 million something plus deficit. And is that correct? And that would be then correlate to a 6.4% increase if we were to cover that amount. Is that correct? And then I look at that, and then I go back up to scenario 1 and scenario 2, and that number seems to be larger than those numbers up at scenario 1 and scenario number 2. So, so the question is, which ones are we looking at here, and what increases that represent?
So then the numbers in scenario 1 and 2 at the top were the projected spending was 38 million, 475,061. The new projection is 37,541,375. So it's less than what we projected in September. That's first. The $2 million increase will have us at a 1.2 million deficit with 6% in the base and 4% increase.
How much of a deficit?
1.2 million.
Is that scenario number 1?
That's going to be what we present as scenario number 1, yes.
That we will, if everything goes, if all the towns agree with this, we will end up with a 1.2.
Yes, the new projections, yes.
All right, so it would really be really good to know the impact of what does that mean for the region, the 1.2 million, in terms of cost reduction.
So
I mean, are we talking about, well, put it this way, if it's 1.2 and we go back to what you're saying in terms of staff optimization, will that decrease that number, or does staff optimization, is that a good way of saying staff cuts?
That's a good way of saying staff cuts and realignment of services, but more so staff, the issue that comes in is that with the 1.2, that we have to make cuts. And so what that does is, and why we haven't outlined what it is, and one of the things I want to present at the Four Towns, and it was on my mind to present this evening, but I didn't, was the definition that we are going to be working from in terms of staffing. And I think that individuals say student-facing positions, and they think about school-based positions as student-facing. In my mindset, student-facing is not a school-based position. Student-facing is the classroom teacher, the para educator, the person that is required to facilitate clear learning consistently, right? And so I want to avoid as much as possible the student-facing positions being the ones that are cut. And look at how do we adequately optimize the staffing that we have without really impacting the programming at the region. I, I can't say that it will mean that no teacher, no one in the teacher category or no one in the para educator category experiences a cut. I don't think that we should impact their whole livelihood. It might be a reduction in time. But those are all things that we are trying to walk through. The issue that comes in is that as we continue to play with numbers versus clearly have a number to plan from, that's where we end up in the pushback, because if we have a clear commitment and consensus from the towns and we're able to plan accordingly, then we can clearly tell you what the impact to the region would be.
The other thing is, and the last thing I want to say is that, does this number in terms of deficit include the unknowns, or the unknown knowns? For instance, transportation, contract negotiations, et cetera. Does it include that?
Yes, it includes estimated. I think what I said was that earlier in the slides, I think it's a slide above it with the persistent unknowns. We projected our healthcare at 13%. That's in there. So if the healthcare comes in below 13%, that would be money that would come back. I think we could kind of play with a little bit. Our transportation costs, we projected out at 10% increase cap in there. And we have been looking at different percentages for APA negotiations.
Sarah.
Question and a comment. So at the financial indicators meeting last month in this room, Amherst, the town manager, indicated that we could, at least for the moment, assume a 3% increase. So is that something you are going to model?
Yes, so we will have two scenarios now. We had 6% increase with 6% base with 4% increase, and 6% base with 3% increase.
Thank you. The comment is that it'd be wonderful if we could have consensus from 4 towns and a clear direction, but nothing is certain until those town meeting or town council votes. So they can't commit. I mean, it's my understanding, they cannot commit to anything. Each person can give his or her opinion, but, and I hope those sentiments are, line up the way we want, but I don't think we can expect commitments.
So I at least would like us to have a conversation around when we disperse from the room, this is what I'm going to go back to my town and council and everyone and push for. I think that realistically, we probably won't have anything until January, right? But they need to be aware of, everyone is saying, we value the schools, we value education, we value the schools, we value education, we value the schools, we value education. And then education gets the short end of the stick, right? And so I think that it's very, very realistically, I know that there is a process to getting that commitment. What I feel needs to happen though is that everyone needs to leave that room and say, we are going to go back and fight for this to occur this way. Like if we can get that consensus, that would be greatly appreciated. But we cannot, one, we have contractual obligations in terms of when do I have to notify individuals if they're going to be rifted or not? Then we also have to think about the fact that why is it fair for a school district to be planning in June and July for how they're going to operate in August? Or September. So it behooves everyone to understand how true educational platforms like systems work, is that for the new school year, 2026, that's what my mindset is set at in January. January, I am already planning for school year 2026. That is where my team needs to be, school year 2026. That is where they need to set their mindset forward. What programs we're going to do, what is that going to look like? So that when it comes down to it, at the end of the year, everyone knows where they're going to be, how we're going to move, what's going to happen. I understand that there's budgetary constraints, but we would need a consensus and agreement, even if it is, we are going to go back and have these conversations with our towns and push for this. That needs to be said so that we can adequately plan and then turn around and present the budgets to everyone else in a timely fashion.
Yeah, building on what Sarah said about Amherst, I think it's not just that they can't commit, it's that they simply won't. I think we should expect that the Amherst Town Council won't provide any consensus or any agreement amongst the town council on anything. You might be able to get individual counselors to say, yes, I will fight for this. But I just don't think that's how they operate. And from what I've seen of how they operate and from past Four Towns meetings, I'm not expecting, I think it's unrealistic to expect Amherst to make any sort of decision or say how they're leaning. It seems like the other towns are able to, as a group, say this is how we're leaning, and Amherst simply, I think they will refuse to do so. Again, you might be able to get individual counselors to say that they'll push for it, but I think it's unreasonable to expect consensus from Amherst. So that's the one big thing, but a smaller thing is, can we look at slide 3 of the presentation? Oh, not slide 3, slide 5. It took me a minute to figure out how to read it. The column labels are cut off. So I just wanted to point out that the 4 actual columns are actual past 4 years, and then the budget column is budget for fiscal 25, right? The projected column is projected for fiscal 26. And the last column says decrease, but I think it's supposed to say increase,
It was
decrease.
the increase and decrease.
Yeah, so
yes.
it looks like that column is a decrease, but because those numbers are all positive, that's just the difference between the projected 26 and the budget 25. So that 2.2 is not the deficit. That 2.2 million at the bottom is the increase of fiscal 26 versus fiscal 25.
I'll fix
Thank
it
you.
and re-upload it to Board Docs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Microphone. So the first thing I'm thinking is just that I fully agree with Tillman, but I don't think it's like a matter of agreement or not. Legally, three of the 4 towns voted for the 6%, right? And so that is the base. So I think that continuing to put forward this idea to Amherst, like, oh, we're gonna model your feelings, that's fine, but feelings aren't, sort of part of the picture here because they voted for it and 3 of 4 towns decided on that, right? And I want to remind everyone that this school committee voted for 8% and we compromised on 6, right? I would love for one of those models to show what it would be to fully fund our schools, not just starting from the assumption of cuts. So that's my first thing. The second thing is I just want to add some context to the data around early start times, because this school district was one of the latest school districts you may ever hear of in returning from COVID. And so we returned with our 7th to 12th graders in May of 2021 to school in person. And then the later start times started that August. So, and I'm not sure, I feel like during COVID, we also had an adapted schedule that started later. So, but only for that COVID year, right? So I think to find comparative data, you probably have to go to like 2019, but then to do that, you're making false comparisons, I believe, because you got to figure in all those habits that changed over COVID. So I just want to put forward the idea that it's possible that our attendance could get worse. I work in schools there, they go to school at 7:45, and I know many students don't show up for those first blocks or two. And so, I mean, just want to like provide that information. I know the later start times have a lot of folks behind them, and then there's other folks, yeah, who have concerns. So I don't think the community's all together, but I know you will get a lot of pushback with that. And the very last thing I wanted to look at was in these slides with special education. You have budgeted there an increase that would bring it to 1.48 million, right? But then you just presented to us that that we've already spent almost that much for this year in Q1. So before we would vote on anything like this, you know, if we keep going at our pace, we'll be at 400% in special ed. So what would cuts look like realistically? I understand some of that circuit breaker, and so we'll see some of that back. But what would the cuts look like for special ed if we were going to go to this budget that you're talking about? I think that's something we should be honest about upfront.
Oh, I agree with you. I think that just so you're aware, I don't shy away from pushback, and I think there's going to be pushback regardless. Anything that's done, change the start time, change the schedule, special education, there's going to be pushback regardless. Somebody's not going to be happy, and so I'm fully prepared for that. That's one. Two, and I can't wait till next week, but there is a series of things that we need to take into consideration when we think about special education. One of the things that needs to be talked about is the use of our one-to-ones. That's one. Two, we do have it's hard to budget special education. I'm not even kidding. As you can see, if you go back to the end, the first column, special education actually used 1.8 million. So it's 26, 25, 24, 23, 22, 21. FY21 at the end of that year, 1.8 million. FY22, I don't know, maybe that I think that's around the COVID time. And then the following year, 1.6, and then the following year, 2 million. Like, it's trending very high at every time we look at the actuals. And then you see that, like, for FY25, it was budgeted at 1.1. And so there are critical things that we're not taking into consideration when it comes to the programming in special education, and we really have to delve deeply into it. One of the things that I asked the team to look at for me is there's like DESE guidance, there's different guidance, there's research that talks about the overdependence of students on one-to-one supports and the impact in terms of the lack of independence and preparation for life. Like, that's what we're supposed to prepare our students for. And my thing is, give our students what they need. If our children need one-to-one, then they need one-to-one. But equity is not equality. And so we need to make sure that we're not just giving them a support because we think that's what they need. We need to give them the support that they need. And the big movement on equity actually started under IDEA and special education. Like, I remember going to a training and there was a picture of 4 individuals at a baseball game trying to look over the fence. And they show equally, if you give them all the same thing, everyone's not going to be able to see the game. And I think that what's happening here is we have a standard menu that a lot of individuals are pulling from. And so we need to be mindful about those services, and we need to do a deeper delve into our special education services. I know the director, administrator will say that I have been pushing that conversation because we do. We do. And honestly and truly, but people move to our district just for our special education services because they know we are going to give their students a one-to-one, or we are going to do these things. And that speaks volumes to the great work that we have happening within our schools. but can we fiscally support it? I don't have an answer to that. So we are projecting out as best as we can, Bridget, but every year it seems to exceed more so. I know the team is working right now to see our out-of-district placements, to see who can return back. We're looking at our Summit Academy, which is a very strong program. Again, a diamond, like a gem, very small. Their students come in, their tuition in, but then we're seeing in the budget where we're affecting the revolving fund on that as well. So there's different conversations that we're having, and we're looking at the team. Everything that we've done with the budget so far from since the Four Towns meeting, the administrators have been in budgetary meetings and conversations. So we have been looking around these things. I'm trying, my purpose is to make sure we have good programming for our students and that as many student-facing jobs can be saved.
Anna.
I wanted to ask a little bit about scheduling. There was a letter that was written to the school committee asking us to support a student project that supports a bill to require schools to start at 9 a.m. and asking if, because we've already done it, whether we would support such a bill. But what I want to know is how much data do we, and apparently the data is all messy because of COVID and when we started it. But I think, we need to look at more than just absenteeism and early release or early dismissal.
Our MCAS data shows.
But also, yes, MCAS and then tardiness. And because part of the rationale for starting at 9 is that older teens' brains function better after 9. And so allowing them to sleep in a little bit and come to school at 9, being fully prepared, more prepared to actually learn after a decent night's sleep and waking up a little bit later, in theory, allows them to learn better. So the question is, are they actually learning better with a later start time, or is that just a myth? And so I think it would be really helpful both to decide whether to support this bill, but also for in our deliberations about what we're trying to do in the next year or two, know whether that later start date has had any impact on student learning and or absenteeism or tardies. And then also if, when we had the earlier start date, did we never release students early for sports? Is that something that only started once we had the later start date in order to have them be able to participate in sports at the same time as they used to or whatever?
I think my understanding about that is there was no need for early release because all of the schools ended at around the same time. So they were able to attend.
Just so everyone knows, I'm trying to make sure everyone gets to speak before war happens again. So William, and I do have Tillman, Deb, and Irv all on the list also.
I was just gonna say that I would welcome. I was just gonna say that I know there's probably families on different ends of start times. And I know for my family, an earlier start time would be more beneficial. So I'm sure there's two sides to every story. But I could speak from sports related for my family is that, my child had to be released and only took 3 classes instead of 4 classes because of her goals in the sports world. And for that, she had to not take a whole entire class for 2 years in high school. I guess it was a year and a half after they changed the start time. She lost a whole period because of what she wanted to do in sports. So I do think it does impact kids having the later start time.
Thank you.
It is true that at the Four Towns meeting, you can't, there's no ability for us to come out. There's no ability for us to come out and for the town council, say for Amherst, to come out and say, yeah, we support this, because they would have to vote on that. However, and I would encourage, I'm not going to be there because I'll be traveling, are members who will be at the Four Towns meeting. My assumption is that there will be a quorum of council members there, town council, that you avail yourselves of asking them for their support and how many of them support what I would consider to be scenario number 2 or scenario one or two, the one with the 1.2 deficit. How many of them will support that in terms of what that means for our base and budget going forward? There's nothing wrong with asking that question to get some certainty on our part. I believe that the support is already there. You just need to ask, but I believe that, from everything that I've known, from everyone that I've talked to, that support is already there.
So I noticed that in the slides, there's something really spectacular in there already that I felt you didn't emphasize enough. Because in slide 3, the projection, which I think was the level services budget, was 38.475 million, top line. And on slide 5, the circled number is 37.54, which means that you and your team have already figured out how to take 2.5% of the budget.
Right.
And I think this is really important to emphasize because one of the misconceptions that the towns may have is that they think the schools are always asking for more and never making hard decisions and cuts. And, it's always comes out to be 6% and it's always, more than they want. So in terms of the storyline, I think in the point that somebody made about trying to get the commitment early is that we're converging. You have done a great step in direction of where the towns want you to be. And, we encourage the towns to take a step towards you. And presumably there might be other opportunities that you discovered where you can shave off a little bit and they can give a little more of a converge on something. I do want to agree with Bridget's suggestion that there should be at least one, that the third scenario should be more than the 4% of the baseline, which we will never refer to again as that percentage. That would, basically be the end of cuts or close to the, what you have in that 37.5 that you have gotten to.
Okay.
Right. And that's basically the ideal ask, and we understand that that may not be possible, but just to know what that number is it 6%, 6.4? Yeah, 6.4. So maybe there should be a 6% scenario and saying this would, limit any further significant cuts, and we could be done with that. Thank you.
Hi, there's been a lot of conversation. So I have 3 topics, but I'm going to hit them really quick. The one is the start time impacts, these are complex systems, as you know, the start time impacts the block schedule, which was a flex block, and it was also a plus block. So there's a lot of pieces, and COVID cannot be separated out from that. Block schedule in particular, the relevance is instead of a 7 drop 1, you have 4 classes, but at the same time, those tests come fast and furious when you have a year of material in one semester. And from my personal experience, every time I turn around, there's an assessment. So that's all I'm going to say about that. For 4 towns, I think it'd be great to get guidance on what it would take from the data at the end of January to get the towns up to 4%. So all my conversations with town officials indicate they will not have that information until the end of January, but we will. One of the big pieces that they're looking at is what the governor's proposed budget will be, and that will be at the beginning of January. So we will have some insight into what kind of wiggle room they have in their budget if they can tell us what kind of space they're looking to create at the end of January, if that makes any sense. I can refine that. And then the last part of Four Towns is it is important to my town that scenarios, including our assessment method,
They do,
be presented and not all the way up to the guardrails.
they do.
Okay.
They include, so the way how we're presenting it this year, and Shannon's going to be taking the lead on that conversation, is we're showing the comparative for each scenario that we have. Sorry, for each scenario that we have, we're showing the comparative of the statutory method versus the assessments, like what we have. So if it's, every town gives a 3% versus what it's supposed to be statutorily.
But statutory is different from the agreed upon assessment method.
Right, so
So there's three.
right,
Yeah, okay.
right.
Yeah, thank you. And then the last part is, I've been telling everyone that we're looking under all rocks. Senator Comerford is soliciting information. She's planning on putting in a piece of legislation for K through 12 funding. She's mindful of the fact that this area of the state was very supportive of the Fair Share Amendment. K through 12 saw some, but not a lot of that money. It's not already earmarked for the projects that have previously been. So you or we as a committee could tell her the kinds of relief that we're looking for, immediate relief in the budget. Lots of people talk about Chapter 70, that's way off. But we can look to the state to fully fund transportation. Take another look at circuit breaker, take another look at the actual attendance rate of special education students rather than some arbitrary thing they created. There are places in our budget, in particular special ed transportation, that she might be willing to push on if we could articulate that. Thank you for that. So that's, and we certainly can activate this committee and our towns and our community to follow through on these like we did with the Mass Promise initiative.
Okay.
Thank you all. And we'll talk about it more on Saturday with our work funding. Okay. Sharon, would you like to call your meeting to order?
Sure. Seeing the presence of a quorum of the Amherst School Committee, I call the Amherst School Committee to order at 8:31.
Seeing the presence of a quorum for Pelham, I call our meeting to order at 8:37 PM.
8:31.
Oh, sorry, at 8:31 PM.
Okay, so for our, the first item that was listed on our joint meetings was the district calendar, which the union has requested that we put off to our next meeting. So next up is our policies. You're up.
Nibby, can you put the policies up for me? So we got a,
Oh, I can do that.
okay. So we had a memo from council saying that we needed to update some policies on the new, or the Title IX revisions that were a while ago. Anyway. So in that, what they suggested we do is that we update the ACE policy, we update the AC policy, and then we eliminate
the ACC, the ACA policy. So it's a little confusing. If we can look at policy, the first one, the ACE policy. I did, on board docs is the new proposed one and then also a copy of the old one. The only additions that they wanted us to make to ACE, according to the council, was the make reference to the grievance procedures. So really all that's been added to this policy is under students, the student section in the second paragraph. It has, the sentence begins with additionally. That is new. And then in the grievance, there are, the words have been switched to talk about the grievance procedures that we have. So it's really not major differences. It's just a few tweaks in words. Yes.
Just one thing I know that this.
This was more derived from council than it was directly from us. So that might be from the Title IX legal words. I'm not sure. I can look at that and see. Go ahead.
Yeah, I noted the same thing for using caregivers else in other policies, and we have the freedom to do that here. I would encourage it, but maybe it's not a good idea. But my question is about grievance, because my only experience with that is in terms of a union. So are we using that word for the process that caregivers and students would also follow, or is grievance here specifically something an employee
It's
does?
to follow the district's grievance procedures, I believe.
But they apply both to students and caregivers?
Yes. they
That's my-
should.
yeah.
Yes.
So I wanted to chime in that when individuals have agreed, I think that the establishment of the policy will be put in place, and then it's for me and my team to determine what the procedural guidelines would be, which would means that if there is an issue where they are upset or they want to grieve it, then we put those policies as to include an appeals process in there if they're upset.
Yeah, it would be part of your procedures, not our policies.
Right, no, it's just, I think in other policies maybe, or maybe other documents, not a policy, but we've talked about complaints. So this just sounds like it's something different, and maybe it isn't, and maybe it's the required word, so.
Yeah, I think it comes from the Title IX stuff. We have to have the grievance procedures. And so that's why those words were changed. Any other comments on policy ACE?
Tillman?
Doing a quick web search, there is a difference between a guardian and a caregiver by mass law. And so we should probably use the language provided to us by council.
Thank you. Any other comments? We will move on to policy AC. Hopefully you'll have time to look over these. We did not make any changes to what council presented to us. And so this is straight from council. Sarah Marshall?
This is a complete overhaul,
The-
evidently.
The,
The modified one.
the
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 revised.
modified.
So my first comment is that this, I believe this is going to pertain to all three districts. So all three districts should be mentioned in that opening sentence. Actually, every time, it's twice in this first paragraph.
Will do.
And then in the third paragraph. So just to check that all three paragraphs are mentioned. But I wonder, I'm a little puzzled by the phrase, all designated youth groups. To me, that means like a church youth group. What is a youth group? This is, do you know?
We had a lot of discussion on that. Anna, do you want to speak to it?
This is related to a lawsuit filed by the Boy Scouts of America and their right to use public property. And so it is now written that youth groups, to include Boy Scouts and other youth groups, that's why it has to say that.
But who designates them? I mean, does the district designate a group to be a youth group? Or is this elsewhere in
was
law?
It was verbiage from law. We had a very large discussion, very large on this. And that is what it is.
Can I give my last one?
Sure, yes.
Okay. So in the next to last paragraph, the first long sentence mentions reports of discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. And I would say against the protected classes. But in any case, going on in the subsequent sentences, I think like not all the same. It's not always discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. Sometimes it's just discrimination. So just make sure that all three are included if all three are meant. If an individual is interested in filing a complaint that they have been discriminated against, but discriminated, harassed, or retaliated against. It's just singling out one of those three categories.
Thank you. Any other comments on policy AC or any other questions, Bridget?
Not the happiest comment, but my understanding is that we're undergoing this because of the Title IX changes, and it's possible that we'll be undergoing, it's very likely we'll be undergoing a new set of Title IX changes. And so then I'm wondering if some of these things at that point would become illegal, and then to save duplication of efforts, if we shouldn't like hear this a little later, even though I will say I agree with all the changes here within.
I did ask that, and we decided we should move forward with this, and then we will make changes as needed in the future. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. And then you can look at we're not going to discuss them tonight, but if we decide after the second read to vote these two policies, we would be looking at not retiring policy ACC, which is specific to Pelham, and we would be retiring policy ACA, those two policies. And yes, hold on 1 second, hold on. I was just going to say that council said to eliminate current policy ACA as it's redundant with the new non-discrimination policy AC that we just talked about, and will be addressed through the grievance procedures. Eliminate current policy ACC as it's redundant with the new non-discrimination policy AC and will be addressed through the grievance procedures. So that was what the council suggested. We eliminate those two policies. So we can discuss those now if you want to, but we will not get rid of them until after we adopt the other two. Go ahead.
Kind of a point of order about the ACC policy. If it's just a Pelham policy, then it's not the business of the joint committee. I'm elected by Amherst people. I don't decide whether Pelham should remove its policy or not.
We could vote, Pelham could vote right now just on the Pelham thing, and even though Amherst people are sitting here, because we're both in session.
True. And that'll be the case the next time, because presumably you're not going to do that now because we don't have a new policy in place.
Correct.
Got
But my thought is when we do have a new policy in place, that the three of us, amongst all of us, could vote on that at the same time.
Right.
Thank you.
Great. Chairs, would you like to adjourn your meetings?
Yes. Can I have a motion to adjourn the Amherst School Committee?
So moved.
And a second? Second. Thank you. All in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous.
I move to adjourn the Pelham School Committee. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor? We are adjourned.
Excellent.
So I call to order Union 26, as I see we have a quorum of Union 26.
Nope, we're in order. You gotta,
So Union 26 is in session starting at 8:43.
all right, let's see. The Amherst Pelham Regional School Committee will now consider entering executive session in accordance with Open Meeting Law MAGLC 30A, Section 21A, to conduct strategy sessions and preparations for negotiations with non-union personnel, Superintendent Dr. E. Ziomara Herman, or conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. And I do declare with no intent to return to open session.
Second?
Thank you, Jennifer. Deb,
Yes.
Dara,
Yes.
Bridget,
Yes.
Jennifer,
Yes.
William,
Yes.
Sarah Bass, yes. Irv,
Yes.
Tillman,
Yes.
Anna.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
The Union 26 School Committee will now consider entering executive session in accordance with Open Meeting Law MAGLC 30A, Section 21A, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel. Superintendent Dr. E. Ziomara Herman are to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contracted negotiations with non-union personnel if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares with no intent to return to open session.
Second.
Thank you. Margaret,
Yes.
Irv,
Yes.
Sarah Bass,
Yes.
William, yes. Bridget,
Yes.
Sarah Marshall.
Yes.
All
So
right.
we're in executive session.
Thank you all very much. Thank you again to the town of Amherst for letting us use their spaces.